Welcome back, everybody, to our next panel discussion. As you all know, I kind of love to update you with what's going on in the world. We've just lost our Prime Minister, who's just been fired, let go, which is great news.
She was doing such a good job.
Well, they've calculated that what they did, they live streamed a head of lettuce with Liz Truss's premiership, and they wanted to understand whether a head of lettuce would outlive Liz Truss, and actually it did. It is incredible. And the amount of time that Liz Truss has spent as Prime Minister of our country, we've got about another 17 Tory Prime Ministers until Christmas. How amazing is that? Brilliant. I don't know. I think we all know what's going to happen. We're going to get Boris back. That's what. Yes, I know. Or the other wet head of lettuce, which is Keir Starmer. Bring back Corbyn, I say. Right? I think he's looking at a great bet right now. Anyway, let's move away from international matters to international matters in payments and remittance. So we are talking about something which is a long anticipated discussion, or not on the metaverse, which was actually a very good topic, and I think we're going to focus on that next year, right, Natalie? We're going to be talking about blockchain. Absolutely. Does blockchain have a future in payments and remittances? Now, in this session, we're going to explore how the money transfer industry can benefit from digital currencies and take a look at the use of blockchain in generating new revenue streams for your money service business. Today's panelists, I'm pleased to introduce, are firstly Elizabeth Rossiello, who is the CEO and founder of AZA Finance, which is based in Nairobi, Kenya. It's the motherland, with the aim of bringing digital currencies to the African market. Elizabeth is committed to expanding access to financial technologies, co-chairing the World Economic Forum's Council on Blockchain, in addition to sitting on the Center for the Fourth Industrial Revolution's Global Advisory Board. She was also recently named as a 2021 Bloomberg New Economy Catalyst. Please have a round of applause for Elizabeth. Next, we have Richard Meredith, who has over 18 years of new business development experience and international sales management experience across Africa, Middle East, Eastern and Southern Europe, the UK and Israel. That's pretty much the world. He is highly skilled within his field, leading incredible change and building successful teams across multiple geographies. Please join in welcoming Richard Meredith, the Head of Sales and Revenue for North and South Europe, MoneyGram. Anthony Barker, founder and director of BP Ventures, over 20 years of banking, IT and crypto management experience. Anthony is a serial entrepreneur after being chosen to participate in Tokyo's prestigious blockchain accelerator program. Now, Anthony has since led a strategy and development effort for BP's Stellar-backed DeFi, right? DeFi investment dashboard wallet solution. Please join me in welcoming Anthony. Do we need an introduction for Walter de Cruz? Let's do one anyway. He is the CEO of Moneo Solutions, has over 35 years of experience within telecommunications, mobile and financial institutions. Walter is a seasoned expert and business leader in the payment space with particular expertise in emerging technologies. Let's welcome Walter. Last but not least, RemitONE's very own Saiful Alom, who's a technical customer success manager. Saiful is a software professional with over 25 years of experience across IT, telecoms, R&D, and fintech. He has led the development of RemitONE's products and is now responsible for the customer success team, helping customers reach their full potential. Saiful will be moderating today's session. Let's hear it from Saiful. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so...
You don't have to stand up, it's fine.
Okay.
I thought you were going to take a bow.
So I stand up and say, oh, are you standing up?
Are you standing up?
You stand up.
So again, this is going to be an hour and a half session, 1 hour of panel discussion, followed by 30 minutes of Q&A from you fine folk, as well as those joining us online. Thank you and enjoy.
Thank you. Just to summarize, it's a talk on blockchain, and a lot of people are going glazing over. It's like, oh, what is that? But in the context of payments and remittances. So that's how we're going to start off. I'm just going to go straight into the questions. And the first question, I'll start with you, Elizabeth, and we'll work down, and then we'll do different people each time. Okay. The first question is, which solutions in the remittance and payment sector today are using blockchain and digital currency? So, Elizabeth, please.
Thanks for that, guys, and thanks for having me. So I'm the founder of this company, but before we were called AZA, we were called BitPesa. And for those of you who know, in 2013, we were the first currency exchange on the African continent to trade cryptocurrencies. And the first female exchange, or the first exchange run by a female founder in the whole world. So we were pretty much cutting edge. And when we spoke to regulators about using this for remittances, they just basically laughed us out of the building. We were, I would say 7 years too early. And we did immediately start with retail remittances. And that's talked about a lot. Can you use crypto for retail remittances? It's a tough business to do. No one has really figured it out. But very quickly on, about 12 months in, we started to use it for settlement with our remittance customers. And I'm looking here, I see a lot of our customers here today. About 85% of the customers that work with us pay us in normal currencies. We call it TradFi, traditional finance currencies. And 15% pay us in cryptocurrencies. And it's been pretty much stable 15% all the way through, although our customers have grown with us. And now we even get corporates who, I would say Fortune 50, Fortune 25 companies that have decided to settle with us in stablecoins. And what do I mean by that? Basically, we buy and sell African currencies, and then we settle them. So a remittance customer will come to us at 9 a.m., they'll buy $1 million worth of credit in whatever currency or multiple currencies, and then we pay out in local currency. I then have corporates sell me the local currency, and I pay out globally. And we've noticed that when you use something like USDC, which is stablecoin, or Bitcoin, you can actually take settlement at midnight. You can take settlement on a US dollar holiday, which is a really big deal. To be able to trade 24/7, 365, you don't understand the usefulness of that unless you work in a treasury team. So, that has been really something that a lot of people don't understand that's been really helpful for us. And we had just a discussion before about how working capital runs this sector, right? If you don't have the working capital in the right places where you need float, you're out of luck. And there are some very big remittance companies who don't have that down or always have trouble moving their working capital around. So the ability to actually use these currencies that can settle 24/7, 365 to be able to move your working capital around. A remittance company pays me a couple million in that. I then settle with a corporate in Europe. They now buy in another market. It's been revolutionary for us. And we love the customers that do it. The problem is not everybody wants to use them, their compliance teams, their executive functioning. So we see a lot of utility in terms of settlement, and we can talk about some other options a little bit later. But we're still facing a lot of challenges from uptake and understanding of how to trade them. One last thing I'll say is that the places where you can buy and sell them, the banks, the exchanges, are much more mature now. You go to some of these OTC desks, they look like better than a lot of the small banks you might do business with in these markets. So people are feeling a lot more comfortable using them as a place to store value.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Richard?
Well, I think if I just look back over the years and you have a look and see, at least when I started in this industry, I'll tell you a little bit of a story and then get into some of the nitty-gritty. Just 10, maybe 12 years ago, we were going around Africa installing software using a floppy disk and connecting it with a 56 kb modem to our partners' computers, right? And that used to work really well. And it just, here today we're talking about blockchain and what that does for remittances. And I think that at MoneyGram we've seen a huge increase in consumers seeking frictionless experiences, digital options, and opportunities for themselves to transact, from their homes. And a lot of governments and I wouldn't say regulators, but people involved in banking consumers. Some more than others have done a great job. And if you look in India, for example, 80 or over 85% of deposits are made into an account or into a wallet. And that's just the digital evolution of where we've come from as an industry. Conversely, if you look in Mexico, over 90% is still in cash. So I think it's still very market specific in terms of the evolution of digital remittances. And then more on the sort of blockchain, MoneyGram has recently done a deal with Stellar Foundation, and that really is sort of providing an on and off ramp for fiat onto the Stellar network, and then through USDC using Circle back out into fiat. And that's really interesting if you think about it. And that just again opens up access to millions of consumers who again don't have access to that traditional financial system, but now have a wallet. That's just really revolutionary, and I think is the beginning of something really interesting that is unfolding at MoneyGram, and I think just generally in the industry as well.
Thank you. Anthony?
Great. So I got involved with blockchain fairly early with Ripple, and then I was starting a remittance company in France, registered with the ACPR, the Bank of France. And I looked around the blockchains. In fact, I knew Vitalik because I used to meet him on top of a pizza store before Ethereum was launched. I asked him, I was thinking of using Stellar for our launch, and he said, yeah, maybe that's the right one, right tool for the job. So we launched with Flutterwave for Nigeria and CoinsPH for Philippines. It's about 6.5 years ago. And the evolution of money transmission, what I've seen is that it's not been totally smooth, particularly the regulators have taken quite a while to figure things out. And I think the banks as well have now realized, like Elizabeth said, it's not quite as risky as black money going across some wire. So I've seen that the evolution now to an extent that the consumers, there's almost 300 million consumers in the world that have used cryptocurrency or have cryptocurrency. They are ready to either use it for cash out, or to hold it against inflation in their country. So the countries that we've seen was big take up on crypto on their own accounts is typically countries like Argentina, Turkey, Nigeria. And when I was at Tempo, the big payout country that we had the most successful was Nigeria initially. And you can see now that about 40% of Nigerians have used cryptocurrency. So I think on the treasury side, there's been a lot of progress as well. But I see that consumers are almost ready. It's like we're hitting some tipping point where they may be able to pay in a stable coin. And I think that what MoneyGram's done with Stellar is amazing. 14 countries, I think, initially for cash in, and you can cash out anywhere. And then after I left Tempo, we've sort of partnered with RemitONE, and you can actually use USDC as well with RemitONE system to cash in, sort of as a replacement or in addition to cards or ACH or SEPA. So we think that the consumer may be at a tipping point in the next little while.
Walter, finally to you.
Well, I've listened very carefully to everything, and the three other speakers have said, and I can't agree more. I think the use case, though, for blockchain, it has been a bit hijacked by cryptos, right? So I think that's something that I've all consistently said, that what we're about here is blockchain and not crypto, and the ability to utilize blockchain to make remittances cheaper, faster, quicker, and fully compliant. That's the way I see the use case developing in the remittance world. Outside of it, there are a lot of use cases for blockchain, but I think what we're seeing now is how it's going to evolve into the enterprise world and how they use blockchain to make their processes more efficient. alongside what we see Treasury functions. I think blockchain for Treasury, I think what Elizabeth said earlier, is just a perfect case, a use case for it. It really is going to, I think, in the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to be down to the use cases. There's a lot of developments around NFTs and all sorts of things. That's going to be consolidation, because I don't believe that the use cases are as practical as it should be as yet. Like, for instance, with NFTs, right? It's not to suggest it isn't. And yesterday, I think we talked about IDV, and there's a fantastic use case there potentially for NFTs to be used as an ID type of way of capturing ID information, right? And preserving it forever. So, where I see happening now is those use cases becoming more and more focused and succinct, and that's really good. It's good for blockchain, it's good for and it'll have a positive effect on the crypto market as well, because as those elements become more credible, the actual crypto market will become credible as well. That's my humble opinion.
Well, thanks for that.
And I think just one other point, what the blockchain does, or the workings of blockchain is, I think to Elizabeth's point earlier, is that it really revolutionizes the settlement process. It's near real time. And if I've listened to some of the other panels and just in the networking, settlement and if you just look here in the UK, banking cash is exorbitantly expensive. And, that is, the banks are encouraging the non-use of cash. I think it was on the earlier panel with Leon. So again, blockchain has a whole lot of uses that is just completely unexplored.
All right, thank you for that. Just the question was obviously what solutions in terms of, sorry? Yeah, but it's good. I think it's clear that you all are involved in this in some way or other, and that it's been around for a while. A lot of people may not know that when they hear blockchain, it's all new, they don't really understand, but actually it's been around for a while. We're now looking to actually put it all into practice in many areas, so that's really good. So I'll move on to the next question. I'll go from there and come back this way this time. So how can MTOs leverage blockchain technology to realize business growth? And some of the question might have already been answered, but Walter, please.
Utilize RemitONE. No, I mean, in serious, RemitONE captures all of this. The challenges for MTOs is obviously price all the time, doing it cheaper and quicker, compliance and settlement and reconciliation and managing all. It's almost like an MTO has to have a treasury department, and treasury in itself is a different area of expertise, and I don't think MTOs or most companies have that in-house. I mean, this is why I like ASA, because they built that intellectual property in their business, which gives us a safe pair of hands to deal with, because it is a science. It's an art form more than the science, I think. And so, to answer your question, I think where I think blockchain can help is the exchanging of data between sending and receiving and the regulators, and also making sure that the information pertaining to transactions are easily gotten to. You don't have to go there for this bit and there for that bit and then consolidate everything. It's all in one ledger and it's immutable. So I think there's immediate sort of benefits for the money transfer operators.
Yeah, just we'll move.
Great. So when we initially started with Stellar, I reached out to Jed McCaleb and I said, okay, you're passing the value, but that's only one part of the remittance transaction. We have to pass the KYC. And as everybody knows, that's where you can get your hand slapped and get fined. So we worked together to come up with a standardized way of passing the KYC information across, and they came up with some standards for that. And so you could get started right now and send money using Stellar, for example, to Kenya or to, Argentina. Your wallet you don't have to have an agreement with the MTO in Argentina. You can have the wallet display the KYC to the user. The user KYCs against the person in the MTO in Argentina and cashes out there. So in one way, it's disintermediating the sending. So in fact, you could actually purchase your USDC with MoneyGram and then go online and actually cash it out at a separate, the user can then cash it out as a separate MTO. So the value of the user we've seen is that because inflation is running at 70%, I think, in Argentina, they'll cash it out over time. They won't cash it out immediately. And so they'll keep, for example, Argentina or Turkey, they'll keep it in dollars. So it's acting sort of as an inflation hedge. And this is something you can tap into right now as an MTO.
Richard?
Well, I think the gentlemen have answered it well. The point I'd like to add is that consumers are changing so fast. And you've kind of got to be, MoneyGram, I guess, we needed to get in, we all need to get into it, right? We have to get into the blockchain space because otherwise you kind of, over time, I guess, become a little redundant because consumers are demanding and are using these wallets so much now. If you're not in it, you kind of miss that new consumer that's coming along. And I think that is what's fueling the growth as well, is just the pure shift to the use of a wallet and a wallet in the crypto space.
Finally, Elizabeth.
Okay, I got a lot to say on this. I've sat through a lot of conferences with the title blockchain, more than I'd really like to have done. And a lot of words get thrown around. I'm a simple person. I'm from Queens, New York. My neighborhood is full of remittance kiosks. So let's be very specific about this because a lot of people say a lot of different things and you're like, how does this impact my business? So there's two ways right now, if you run a remittance business, that you could start to get involved. And I would say stay away from a lot of the overly complex stuff because like most things in life, if it's overly complex, it's overly complex. And it's not what we're looking for, it's not efficient. So there's two really ways. I would recommend that you guys think about looking into some of the bigger exchanges, which are now like neobanks. And you can open up an exchange account and you can actually use it as a dollar account. I know when we're running the business, I've got 70 banks globally, but for the first 6 to 7 years, our banks were constantly getting closed, just doing remittance. So you can go to an exchange like Bitstamp, you can open up an account and you can have $1, you can have euro, you can have sterling, you can have a lot of other currencies, and you can have cryptocurrencies. These are becoming the new neobanks. Also, Revolut just got a license to now have cryptocurrency accounts. So the first thing I would say is look for a bank, a business bank account that you can have at one of these exchanges and just test it out. Put a couple $1,000s in there, try to make a transaction with one of your counterparties. You'd be surprised who's using it nowadays and get a feel for what this feels like. It's like the first time you sent a SEPA payment or the first time you sent a faster payment. It really is revolutionary in how fast it can be. And it's not perfect. There's still some ways around it. We were in a lawsuit case about something else, and we had to provide all of our accounting history. And the judge was like, what are these? And we're like, well, it's a fintech we're using, and the statements are very informal. And what we had to do is show that, some of these fintechs have informal statements. And we eventually got through and everything was fine. But the idea is that, it's evolving, but this is the new way to bank. So I think if you haven't explored a neobank account or you haven't looked at a corporate bank account in one of these exchanges, you're really missing out on a lot of the features that they have. The second thing is to put a payment acceptance that allows your users to use crypto to pay. I don't know how many of you have PayPal or debit cards as ways to pay. Has anybody here have a payment form that accepts crypto? PayPal in the US accepts crypto now, exactly. There's one called BitPay. It's like PayPal, a Bitcoin. It's a little expensive, but it's the oldest there is, also run by Italian Americans, who I know very well, out of Atlanta. But I mean, there's a couple of those that are simple ways to integrate. You put the button up on your screen, people use it, they use it, they don't use it, they don't use it. But it's an experiment into understanding this. And we can take bets now and say we're 18 months away or we're 18 years away, but it is gonna come at a certain point. What I've been really surprised about in the African markets that we work in it was like 4 to 5 years, nobody was really doing anything. And then all of a sudden, the last 3 years, we have about, well, it hasn't taken off retail, I'll admit that. We had about 8 currency exchanges created. We have 1 in Cameroon, 2 to 3 in Ghana, quite a few in Nigeria, and they're actually trading this. And it's not a lot of users, but the users are young, they're technically savvy, and they're moving money around. And you want this. These are your higher end remittance users that are exciting. This is the new class of remittance customers, and they're trading on these exchanges, and they want to be able to pay with this. So, I wouldn't have said this 5, 6 years ago, but in the last 18 months to 3 years, we're starting to see the young employed class that's moving money around and receiving money and paying out money use this as a payment, but it's not for the masses. So I wouldn't invest $1 million in this, but you can get it pretty cheaply. You can have a payment acceptance that accepts it on the retail front, and then also for your treasury team or your operations team, try to open up a corporate bank account with one of these exchanges. It's pretty surprising how much we've evolved from them not being able to have monthly statements to now very sophisticated, very well regulated by the CFTC, the SEC, the FCA. And on those 2 areas, I think you can dip your toe in a very practical way.
So move on to the next question. But okay, the last question was about realizing business growth. So I think you've answered it in a varied way, so it's good. So the next one is, how can crypto and blockchain assist MTOs in facilitating cross-border payments? I'll start with Anthony this time. Just your opinion.
I'm going to sort of answer your question in an indirect way. So the first thing I would say is, to reiterate what Elizabeth said, is I recommend using a US dollar like USDC for remittance companies. Typically, Bitcoin fluctuates quite a bit during the day. And when we did tests with Bitcoin, we found that we could make some money. We'd sometimes make outsized amounts, but sometimes we'd lose an amount. And just from a treasury perspective, it was hard because it was fluctuating up and down 5 to...
Don't trade the Ghanaian cedi.
Yeah, well, exactly, or Nigerian, yeah. But so just on the cash acceptance front, to accept US dollars, and also the system already, like RemitONE, will already have a dollar rate. So you can basically put it $1 to $1, and it's not fluctuating all over the place. So I would recommend starting with some sort of stable coin. It makes it easier to get started.
Okay, and to the question. So how can the crypto and blockchain assist MTOs in facilitating cross-border payments?
Well, I think we've covered it. That's all we've been talking about.
Some of them are very similar in terms of...
I think that's the USDC, through Circle or again, using that as
you can send it again. Long weekends, I remember we would have a 3.5, 4 day cash cycle. So someone would come on the Friday, you get your cash. The cash pickup guy from Brinks would come on the Monday or the Tuesday. Get the bank in the bank account on the Tuesday. But the person wants the money in the developing country on the Saturday. So you basically have 3 to 5 days out of pocket. And crypto helps solve that.
Now, it's interesting you said crypto, because blockchain alone doesn't help that. No, and we were having a chat about this before, because blockchain can be a messaging. Think of it like the messaging, like your API that sends through the name, the date of birth, the telephone number, the KYC points. That can travel, information can travel. But if you don't actually have a piece of value, I don't necessarily want to, I'm a payout provider, I don't want to pay out unless someone's paid me, unless we have a counterparty credit arrangement. So we have to make sure that we couple them together in terms of that payment.
One of the things I want to highlight, though, is crypto or blockchain doesn't disrupt your business model. It's not, you don't all of a sudden wake up and change the way you do treasury or settle or manage counterparty risk. It just makes it easier, better, quicker. I mean, simply that, right? So there's not some big scary thing you have to worry about in terms of, it's going to disrupt everything I do and how my workflows, my processes. And if those aren't right, I don't care what technology you apply to it, it won't work. So those are the sort of factors that you just realize that you're just applying the technology in a way that's going to make your business run better and make your job of managing your business better, right? It's not something that's going to change your business model. And I think often that's a bit of a blocking point for people in blockchain, is they think, well, I have to change things, I have to get a new, whatever it is, and you don't.
Okay. The thing is that, like you said, the first three questions, they also merge into one sort of area. So I think there's a slight change, hopefully. So when evaluating a crypto payment vendor gateway, big mouthful, what are the critical questions to ask? So when you're evaluating, one of your solutions perhaps, what are the good questions?
I think we're all using the same crypto, right? And I think that's what's coming out of this. If you have like a young, niece or nephew that's trading crypto coins and there's like 10,000 of them out there, that's not necessarily what you want to balance your business on. I always say stick to the gold and silver of the industry, You're not going to, stick to the G8 currencies of the crypto and, use those hard cryptocurrencies as something. Because at the end of the day, it's a credit risk. You want to be able to sell it if you have to, at the end of the day. So usually, I think we're all talking about the same 5, 6 cryptocurrencies that we use to do that.
Correct.
Yeah, Richard, same.
Well, I was just thinking on the previous comment. Blockchain. I think as a business, one does need to disrupt yourselves, right? I mean, if you've been traditional for a long time, to get into the space, just some form of disruption in your own business is important, because it does require a little bit of a different thinking. If that's if you've started out in the crypto space or in the blockchain space, fine. But if you haven't, and you're still running that sort of traditional, walk-in cash business, there is a fair amount of disruption that you have to do in your own thinking to get yourself to another point. So I just wanted to make that comment.
Can we ask the audience, how many people here have brought some aspect of this into their business?
I guess, one.
So very few. How many people are considering it?
Okay.
Very few more.
Yeah, so that disruption is definitely there. I think it's,
So when you say disruption, you're talking about changing the way settlement flows and reconciliation. It's disruption is such an easy, flippant word to use. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I mean, this is the problem I have with blockchain and the way people perceive it. It's not some rocket science. The fundamentals of it have been around for years, for literally years. It's the same as cloud computing. Everyone goes, so it's been around for 30 years, right? And to suggest that it's going to disrupt your business model, that is the thing that's stopping people from doing it.
yeah.
Right? It is a relatively straightforward process if you take the black arts out of it, and it's quite easy to do it, right? So I'm sorry, we have a disagreement on that, but I certainly don't think it needs to be disrupted.
Yeah.
A business needs to be disrupted to employ new technologies, right?
I mean, I suppose from the business point of view, they won't see what happens there anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
I think where the disruption is if you're a big company with shareholders, right, and ties to regulators and lobbyists, that's when it can be really disruptive to their business model, because they've created a business model that has sustained a standard for them, right? So that's why they say that blockchain is disruptive, because it is cutting their lunch in a way. It's like the fact that the banks won't provide MTOs with bank accounts. Why would they? When they want to be able to move that money, right? And that's the fundamental problem. This community of blockchain has been fighting this for such a long time. And we had a planning session for this call, and the first thing Elizabeth said, which why I sort of totally loved what she comes from, is we have use cases. This is mature. It's not some weird thing. And we got to dispel some of these myths. And one of them is it disrupts your business.
And the other is, we didn't build our own blockchain, and I don't think I ever would. I also would never go into retail, so I'm different than a lot of you. But I think for us, it's out there. We opened up a currency account at a digital exchange, a cryptocurrency exchange. We love it. It's one of our best banks. We have a big broker dealer in New York. It's, again, one of our best banks. And that crypto dealer in New York banks the World Bank. They literally have the UN and the World Bank as their own clients. So it's a very, been licensed 20 years. They trade a lot of different things. I think from a banking perspective, you all know you have to use first, tier 1 banks, tier 2 banks, neobanks. It's been pretty exciting to have this almost like other avenue to use. And then, when we were trading in China, we were paying out to China, we didn't have a payout provider, and we found a cryptocurrency provider first. And they paid out same-day payments in RMB, and it was pretty exciting, and that's how we used it to get started. Now, the thing that is different is that the regulators are all over the place on this, and they shut down that in China, but they opened it up in other markets. Just today, I believe the South African Reserve Bank published new regulation about cryptocurrency, making it even easier to use it in South Africa. So although some markets close it down, others are opening it up. And you can integrate into your existing business. Right now, across the African continent, UK and Europe, most regulators, if you have an authorized payment institution license or a money transfer license, you can simply get an approval that you can also use cryptocurrency. And if you're not using it for retail, if you're just using it for treasury settlement, like we discussed in the beginning, you don't need a license for it. So that's pretty exciting. If you start to offer it, it goes under normal regulation.
Just before we go, what's interesting is that you've answered the next question, essentially.
Sorry.
No, it's fine.
To add to that, in the UK, the latest consultation that's gone back to the government, which was supposed to have been produced a bill in the autumn parliamentary, but obviously there's a few distractions there, was to utilise the EMI, the Electronic Money Institute facilities, to allow crypto. So I'm hoping that that legislation will be in Parliament in the next session. I don't know, obviously with the changes that's happening, and that's certainly going to add some clarity to.
We've had FCA approval since 2015. So we've had FCA approval.
I know, but I'm talking about firstly, to get FCA for crypto is impossible. Well, there's such a long wait list, you're lucky
Well, it
to.
depends on what you want, because we've had our.
Do you have your store and trade thing, or?
We've had our own business model approved, and we trade crypto. We were open about that, and so we had it approved as like an approval of our business plan. So I think there are ways, if you're not selling it in a retail way, you could already have it approved by the FCA under your existing
on the
license.
formal register, on the formal crypto. Okay, interesting. You learn something new every day.
Just for the audience's sake, I mean, the next question was going to be, how is the blockchain industry currently being regulated in relation to remittances and cross-border payments? So, I mean, obviously, Elizabeth already spoke about regulations, so has Walter. So, is there anything further you want to say on that? Sorry, go ahead.
I think the one thing that the regulators get confused on, because it's the money transfer versus security license regulation. Like in my country, Canada, initially they came up with a nice money transfer license. Now, the Security Exchange in Ontario, OSC, is now saying, oh, no, crypto, even stable coins, no, that's a security. So there's a little bit, that one of the things that I think has slowed down the whole process is that the regulators themselves can't agree on who should be regulating what.
So do you think the court case at the moment between the SEC and XRP and so on, with respect to that definition of whether
Well,
they
I'm
call
just
it
talking about stable coins now. So like for me, a stable coin, it's not paying interest. It's for me, it's very clearly not a security, that it should be regulated by a security thing. It doesn't make sense. And so Binance got a cease and desist in Ontario. So I'm just saying that the regulators themselves, in certain cases, one of the things that slowed down the adoption has been the regulators haven't been clear. Again, in Canada, one of the earlier regulators, 5 years earlier, said, okay, it should be treated as a commodity, as a payment method. That's what they said, not as a security. But.
Yeah, I mean, let's not confuse everybody about all the different things that are happening globally around this. I think in terms of the remittance industry, like we said, it's either an EMI or an API, payments or EMI. And then in a lot of markets in Africa, you just need a letter of approval. In some markets, it's been under the SEC. So if you have a relationship with a broker-dealer, or you happen to be a bureau d'échange or a BDC, you can just go to your regulator, discuss it with them, and get your approval letter. So in most of West Africa, that's how it works under the SEC. So it's been even easier in some markets to do that. I think Uganda was the only market that actually had a blockchain line of regulation, but they associated with their MTO API license.
And for example, in El Salvador, I'm working on a project where they're doing, I think, 80,000 Bitcoin Lightning transactions. Now this is Bitcoin for cable payments. So depending on the jurisdiction, everything can be a little bit different. But people are able to pay and are paying for their internet cable using Bitcoin Lightning.
El Salvador's gone blockchain altogether. They've adopted that, didn't they?
Yeah,
Or something?
there's about 3 million people that have a Bitcoin wallet in El Salvador. And for example, in Nigeria, I think there's 5 million Bitcoin wallets. There are a lot of Bitcoin holders in a lot of these jurisdictions.
Yeah, and like already Mercado Central, so like one of the largest e-commerce players in Mexico, now almost 7 years has accepted cryptocurrency. So again, they don't need a license for that. So if you're accepting it as a form of payment and you use something like BitPay or one of the other providers, you actually don't need a license because you're never touching it. It's like using a credit card. So the provider will be licensed. So there's a very easy to start way to get into this without seeking additional licensing. You know, if you're not building your own blockchain or you're not creating something very special, you can touch this industry and you can touch this technology in a way that's easy, efficient, and a low-cost way to test it out.
And I saw a chain analysis. Did you read their most recent thing? They said 8% of all transactions in Africa, which is a lot of people here in Africa, are peer-to-peer transactions for payments. So that's actually huge.
It's not topping mobile by any chance in these markets, but it's starting, yeah.
Right, we'll move on to the next question, and this is a bit more broader. So I'll give it to Richard first. I mean, it will come round. What does the future look like in terms of cryptocurrencies? Will they replace major hard currencies in international payments, do you think? So, Richard?
Well, I think there's the case there that you know, if you look across a lot of governments and central banks, that they you know, everybody's trying to get as digital as possible. You know, you could talk about the central bank currencies. Whether it replace fiat in the short term, I don't know. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of opinions out there that would say no. But it's certainly there's certainly a lot being done for that conversion to happen. Is my opinion.
Sterling's not looking so good right now.
Exactly. You know, so if you just look at where fiat is globally, it's struggling. So there's a lot of case for this to happen and quickly.
Okay.
And you know, a lot of governments are being proactive about it, and regulators, you know, alike. So let's see. I mean, it's a big space.
I think like countries that are dollarized already. So, you know, Central African currencies like the DRC or like El Salvador, some places that already don't use their local currency and they use the dollar. This is the stablecoins, it's basically a dollar derivative, are amazing because they struggle to get the actual cash. They struggle to get the reserves. So their population can still be pegged to the dollar with this digital token. So I think that's where we're going to see it. Namibia just announced that they're going to be doing that as well.
If you look in the emerging markets, I think there's a case for it. It's happening a lot quicker than perhaps in some of the developed markets.
And places like Venezuela, where everything's crashed there.
Yeah, well, they were kind of forced into it, weren't they? And you know, they adopted this because they needed to. Argentina, I guess, the same case.
Same question to Walter.
I got asked this question by Arif via email a couple of weeks ago, you know what the impact of CB... Firstly, I'm not Nostradamus, so I don't know. I mean, I don't know anyone else is, but what I do know is perhaps CBDC. I see the early use of it in terms of wholesale connection of global financial markets, treasury, etc. You know, and that, in a way, Bitcoin lends itself to that function anyway, right? Yeah. Where's CBDC going to head? It's so hard because I've heard versions, say, out of America that suggest that maybe they're going to create a red back, like as opposed to the green back, using CBDCs as a way of almost resetting the US dollar.
Maybe you should explain what CBDCs are.
Isn't that what we're talking about? Or
Well, I mean,
did we define it
in
properly?
general.
Oh, sorry, I thought-
with no, it's fine. I
okay,
think that's
sorry,
all
it's
part of
my
the-
hearing. I thought you mentioned
That's all
CBD.
part of the conversation because I
Okay,
think it's
right,
very
sorry.
important. So, but I mean, the question was like, what does the future look like? And so this is what you're talking about. So that's
CBDC,
fine.
so central bank,
Cryptocurrencies.
central
So-
bank
yeah.
issued currencies is
Yeah,
what you're talking
digital
about.
currency.
I mean-
So a little different than what I said. I said smaller countries should use the same derivative.
Yes.
Because like they'll have more adoption. It's like if everybody created their own way of, different sockets, like going across Africa, you have 3 different sockets and, nobody really uses, no offense, the South African one that much.
It's horrible.
It's tough to gain, to get those plugs elsewhere. So if you're a small country, you use already an existing one. The problem with the CBDCs is it's a low-cost way for governments to just keep issuing their own sockets.
Right.
And you're like, unless people want to use it, you're going to end up with a dollarized dollarized market.
Sorry, I didn't hear. I thought you said CBD. I don't know. I must be
No, but
dreaming.
that was mentioned is fine. I think it still fits under the question, really. And we're asking about whether cryptocurrencies will replace major hard currencies. It could also be CDBCs. I'm sorry, central bank CBDCs. I'll get that wrong way around. So central bank digital currency. I believe that's what it stands for. And this has been talked about by all major countries now, and they're looking into these sort of things. So it's very important. In fact, the conspiracy theorists are going mental on this one. From what I've read, I've got an uncle who keeps sending me stuff, and he says like, they're going to replace money. It's not good. This is all bad. They're going to stop your money and all that. So there's a concern as well in the public. Although the conspiracy theorists, they go down several rabbit holes and it gets a bit thinner. But I mean, what you're talking about here is using things like stablecoin and stuff like that to reassure people, I guess, in a way, to sort of say this is safe to use and so on. Anyway, next question to Anthony as well. If you're same question.
The future?
Yeah.
The nicest crypto remittance platform I've seen was Coins.ph, which is in the Philippines. And they basically had created themselves an app. You could use it for everything. Basically, you can buy fast food. You can pick up cash at the ATMs, even if you don't have a bank account there. They have an interesting thing with certain Union Bank. And for me, when I saw that, that was sort of a kind of a digital future, sort of what they'd been doing in China with WeChat, but in a way that was using an open platform as opposed to a closed platform. And I got quite excited about that. I think for me, I'm hoping there's going to see more sort of open platforms that are connected so I can add funds from anywhere and I can use it as I want. So it's basically giving more freedom to the consumer and at the same time giving them a way of protecting themselves from a government that maybe is doing things that they, in Latin America particularly, dollar accounts for rich people only, and having a dollarized stable coin allows the average person to protect themselves like the rich people were doing the decade before.
To the point your point earlier on inflationary, still hedging. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Okay. We'll move on to the next question. It just says, what next? What should we expect to see in this space in the next 12 to 24 months? So, Elizabeth.
I think you're going to see a lot more fintech products involving this. So your customers are not going to be surprised if you were to add this as a payment form, because they're going to be seeing this on their neobank, they're going to be seeing this in their e-commerce platforms. People in Europe and the UK who are sending remittances, who are anywhere from 18 to 40, are playing around with this as an investment mechanism. We're seeing a lot of the younger people going into shorter term investments as opposed to long-term investments. So you see a lot of people like buying and selling computer games, so video games. This is a huge, huge area. A lot of people who, anywhere from, my kids are 12 all the way up, are now going to be exposed to cryptocurrencies in these video games. So it's going to become more and more mainstream. I'm not saying it's taking over Visa or MasterCard yet, but I think it's going to become much more mainstream and people are going to want to be able to pay with it. If they're earning it on their video game, if they're using it on their e-commerce, if some young people are getting paid in it. At our company, we have the option to pay your employees in it. I think they're going to be wanting to use it for other things, and it'll seem a little bit more common. And the costs are going to be a little bit lower on how to use it.
Don't get ideas, RemitONE, please. Still pay me in fiat, please. Thanks. For now. Just kidding. Walter.
I always thought that where crypto especially would really take off is when one of the big e-commerce platforms adopts it, Amazon.com, one of those. And when I saw Dell and Microsoft and even Tesla adopted, I thought this is really good.
You can pay your Google servers.
Exactly. But if Amazon's got the Amazon coin thing, it's sort of like, not Bitcoin, of course, but I think when one of those big e-commerce platforms truly adopts it as a form of accepting payment, I think that's going to go a long way in terms of user acceptance. Banks could maybe start that process, but I think it'll start in the world of e-commerce and money transfer.
Do you see that happening anytime soon?
The Revolut.
It is happening. Obviously, Amazon, a big company, and we debated disruption. Amazon's obviously business model is already digital, right? Yeah. So for them to employ this sort of payment method is easy, right? It's why you ask yourself, why haven't they done it? It's not disrupting their business model, right? It's disrupting other key partnerships that they have to bring to the table. That would be my take on it.
Anthony, your question, answer on that?
I think that I agree with what Walter said. The only question for you, though, is I can do that already. I buy a gift card with USDC, and I can go buy on Amazon. How is that any different if I can go direct?
Well, you see, in the UK, if I buy something on Amazon, I have to use a card, right?
But can't you buy a gift card? I mean,
you could, but that's a second.
The wallet, I just one click and I have an Amazon gift card.
I suppose you could buy Bitcoin with crypto and then use the gift card to buy it. But that's a two-step. Maybe the kids might do it, but for...
I used one where I went to the MoneyGram, I top it up from MoneyGram, and one click I've got the Amazon gift card. And in French, in euros.
So then you can use that. So, but it's still is that an Amazon product or is that?
Yep.
Yeah. So you can buy Amazon gift card.
It's an American product right now. I don't think it's not everywhere.
Okay. But it's still then you have to do it outside the ecosystem.
It's in the same app. It's one click, one click.
And then,
Expedia, you can book hotels. I've booked hotels on Expedia for 8 years.
Yeah.
For 8 years using crypto.
So I'm only not debating you. I do think that'll be huge.
But it's coming,
but I think it's slowly coming already. Yeah. Okay. In terms of the future, I think it's just slow steps. If you look at the adoption of credit cards, which I was looking at recently, it took 20 years to reach from about 10% to about 80% of people having credit cards. It wasn't like Instagram, where everyone took it overnight. So I think financial changes are slower than other technology changes. So I just think it's keep plodding ahead, and we'll have double the number of users in 5 years.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're extremely optimistic about blockchain in general. I think, what MoneyGram's done with Stella, and there's potentially others out there as well that will come, is really great. And we're continuously looking for new ways to facilitate cross-border payments within that blockchain network. And I think that's going to come, whether we like it or not. That, if you want to call it revolution, is there, and you've got to embrace it. So for sure, there's a lot of optimism around it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll stay with you in the next question. So which markets are seen as the primary adopters of digital currencies and blockchain to process cross-border transactions? It's related, I suppose, and I think partially you've answered it. Start with it.
Yeah, well, I think the emerging markets are really up there. They're kind of getting forced into it. Their home currencies are disappearing. I mean, to your point, the pound's not looking so good either. So perhaps it's a good case here as well. I don't know, but certainly emerging markets. The US, the UK. Some of those big markets certainly definitely up there, but emerging markets are really up there with a great chance of revolutionizing this business using blockchain.
Right. So, yeah, I mean.
Also, remember, you have a lot of young people who want to invest, right? And I've had so many Nigerian startups where they're like, our concept is to get Nigerians to be able to invest in the U.S. stock market, and they have this like crazy fund flow for them to be able to buy U.S. securities. Now you buy crypto and you can invest anywhere around the world. We've done a huge partnership with FTX, which is the second largest crypto company in the world. And we are doing all their foreign exchange and all their processing for them across Africa. And a big part of what they do is they have derivatives of global stocks. So they have like a derivative that's pegged to Tesla. They have a derivative that's pegged to Impossible Foods, which is like vegan meat. You know, they have a derivative to all these cool like young people stocks, right? So you can be in Korea, you can be in South Africa, Namibia, El Salvador, or here in London, and you could, in an instant, access the upside of these equities. And to be actually go in and register with a brokerage and purchase this thing is a lot of KYC and a lot of hassle. And people are doing it already right now. And it's the new way that I would say people in their 20s and even their late teens are learning to invest. And I think we've had so much GDP growth across the equator, especially in Kenya with the financial boom, then Nigeria, now Ghana, Senegal, top 10 GDP growth. All of these young people now have disposable income. They're engineers, they're product designers, they're online. They're actually wanting to invest. And they buy crypto and then they invest in like a Korean exchange or they invest via FTX. And so we're seeing a huge growth of this. And I would say, you know, we work with a lot of bureau de changes across the continent. Right now, in most of our markets, in the top 5, 1 to 3 are cryptocurrency bureau de changes because of this. So, you know, we've seen the growth mimic where the GDP growth has been and where disposable income is.
Right. I mean, we are sort of running short on time. So last question, I think it's, you know, anybody can answer. So what are stablecoins? I think somebody explained that. And how do I know if they are trustworthy? And that's a concern as well.
Trustworthy. I think this is my question, and that was just to dispel some maybe confusion around one stablecoin in Korea, which wasn't really a stablecoin and melted down. Which maybe who here has heard of this UST or Luna meltdown? Okay, we've got a few people out there. So that was not a stablecoin that was backed by cash. So you have to differentiate. So my comparison is you're going to have stable. It's like a bank is a good place to save money, store your money, except if it's in Cyprus during the financial crisis. So there's banks and there's banks, there's stable coins and there's stable coins. So pick one that's backed by cash in a country where you trust the regulation. That's what I would say.
And there's rule of law.
And there's rule of law, exactly.
To claim it back. I think, you know, when I said before exchanges, there's tons of crypto exchanges, but if you can sign up for an exchange without giving any KYC, don't do it.
Don't do it, yeah.
Right? If you can remit money without giving any ID, I think you all know what kind of remittance agent that is, right? So you might want to use it if you're in a rush, but you're definitely not going to put your life savings into it.
Exactly.
So, you know, people tend to think that, oh, it's a new technology. Let me take my brain and put it on the table and, you know, use new rules. We have to use the same rules we use anywhere else. Do we respect their KYC? Do we respect the team that's operating it? Are they licensed? What kind of structure do they have? It's a counterparty risk you're taking. So, you know, if Amazon issues a coin, the counterparty risk for a lot of people feels comfortable.
Yep.
If a startup that has one dude who's, you know, 19, the counterparty risk feels a little hectic. It's the same way.
And let me just put an add-on to there, because there's compliance risk as well, which there's a bunch of compliance people in the room. So these coins can actually blacklist wallets. USDC has a list where people cannot accept it. They can freeze the funds. They are actually like financial institutions. So it's not willy-nilly people sending money everywhere. They have lists. There's also something called elliptic, which you can see back. What was that money used for? And I think MoneyGram does it back to 6 steps back. Right. So they can see if did the money come from drugs? Was the money used for weapons? So it's actually more clarity than cash. And I think it's safer than cash. So that's my last point.
And actually, the court case that I mentioned was super interesting because Elliptic was involved in it. There was like a crime, I don't know where, somewhere in the US. And we were like the 7th place or something that this coin touched. And we had to show all of our KYC around those transactions when this coin came through, and we passed that information on to the security. So I don't know if you can find the 7th place that cash touched that quickly and have that person, that kiosk, submit as much information as we were able to submit, and they actually solved the crime. So I think it's pretty cool, the kind of information that can be traced. Now, if we were libertarians, we wouldn't think it was cool. But if we're compliance officers, maybe we do.
The point is just that it's not, you have to do a little bit of research, and it's not as risky as you might read from reading the headlines of newspapers.
Right. Thank you very
Those
much.
are sometimes a great source of information.
True.
Okay, I think now we'll open it up to the audience to ask questions. And if there is anybody who wants, UBA there.
Good afternoon. My name is Wale, United Bank for Africa. It's been a very insightful session, very insightful for me, and I happen to know a lot about AZA and
Oh, did you just close all my accounts?
know what you're doing. And when those guys talk, I struggle to understand because some of the guys I train in FX are doing bigger than me in cryptos now. So I'm like, but going to my question, it goes back to the regulators. African regulators are all facing the same challenge, again, like I said earlier, which is managing their reserves, managing cash, exchange controls. Now you're talking about someone, investing in the US market, just simply using cryptos. I know if that had to go through the official means, I know the whole list of documentation that would be required. All sorts of certificates and all that, evidence, blah, blah, and all that. So what are you going to, because you're going to have those challenges. There was also something I read at a point about, criminals using it for ransom, for kidnapping. And again, the regulators stopped it and they released it again. But your last point seems to have, addressed that. The fact that it leaves that digital footprint, it's easier to actually solve crime. So that's a positive, and I think. But I'm going to ask, are you planning or working with regulators to train them? Because this is something very attractive to the young people, We know regulators are more about years of experience, so you don't have so many young people in the central banks. So are you planning to train them, sort of get them to more understand these products, accept it? And yes, even the Central Bank of Nigeria is talking about its own CD, its own digital currency, ECB, but everybody is talking about it. Yeah. Are you working that close with the regulators to train and sort of get that acceptance? Because this is obviously the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. So first of all, what I was talking about is a derivative. So it's a derivative on Tesla. So it's regulated as a derivative by the SEC in most African countries. So you have to go to the SEC, explain that you're selling derivatives, and the money stays local, and they have to have a pool of money to meet that. So that's what that goes under. I spend almost all my time with regulators. I wish I spent less time. Like I said, 9 years ago when I was going into Central Bank of Kenya, they were like, who is Mr. Bitcoin? And like yelling at me like I'm representing something, Now, 2015, when I first moved to Lagos, I helped write the white paper that the first working group used. Now the problem is there have been 2 working groups per year, and every member of each working group is different than the working group before. I think this is what we have the problem with a lot of the regulators, is that it's politics. So, you have a lot of shifting people. I mean, look what just happened today in the UK. Yep. So it's really hard to build momentum. And this is a nerdy topic. It's hard to build momentum when everything moves over. However, time heals. Finally now, we have enough people who've been listening to these white papers and these working groups enough times, enough fintech associations, that finally some things are sticking. And we did have the SEC in Nigeria release regulation, which was very exciting last year, although the CBN may or may not accept that regulation, Like I said, the SARB in South Africa released another set of regulation. We've had Ghana be very proactive. So it's taking time. We've also seen Revolut just get their license in the UK, but other cryptocurrency companies like Binance and blockchain.com were rejected. So sometimes we see regulators say, we'll take one big company, but that's it. We don't want to be a blockchain hub. And they want to see how that goes and move forward. But this is already better than it was a couple years ago. So I completely agree with you on the regulators. How are they going to understand this topic? But let me tell you, people who are into this technology are passionate. So there's no end to people willing to travel to talk into regulators' ears about this. And that's one good thing I'll say about the industry, is that there's a lot of passionate zealots who want to do this. So I think, the problem might be communicating the message in a centralized way has been hard. You have a lot of people saying different things. but now big business is getting involved. Fidelity, one of the largest asset managers in the world, has a lot of funds for this, allows use of this technology for their customers. I mean, when Fidelity comes to talk to the regulator listens. So you're starting to see bigger institutions get involved, and eventually we'll get there.
I can't
Yeah, I
speak for the SEC,
need it.
but I can speak to the FCA, and what I've seen in 20 years, that the FCA has always lagged behind the markets in terms of having the intellectual property to deal with these different types of products. They come, whether it's crypto or some new form of derivative or whatever, right? You know, they're always way ahead of the FCA, and I just, you know, I think it's obviously a question of money as well. I know in the FCA here, they're not paying their staff enough money and they're going to the private sector. So there isn't consistency, and what Elizabeth's saying is right. And whether or not that gets fixed, I don't know, because it's all about, at the end of the day, it's all about human resources, right?
But I would just say, you know, just look at your own regulator, wherever that might be. Engage them proactively. I mean, listen to their questions. You know, create some dialogue. You know, tell them what you're thinking. They can do the same. And, you know, in the most, there's hopefully some form of meeting of minds, and one can move forward. And that dialogue and that consistency of dialogue is so important. And to Elizabeth's point, you need to continue to do that, because, as you say, the turnover is high, and that consistency is really important. Don't be scared to create that dialogue. It does help in the end, you know.
Are there any other questions? Oh, there's one. Arif, oh, he's gone to the back, okay.
Thank you so much for the insightful session on blockchain. I just have a question about MTOs in general. They struggle a lot with the liquidity, especially when it comes to pre-funding with several counterparties and all. So do you see the blockchain really as a kind of problem solver for on-demand liquidity with such MTOs? And if so, how is it going to work out in practice?
For us, it solves the issue of speed, right? So, you know, sometimes the counterparty will say, oh, we sent the payment, here's the POP, and then it disappears for 3 days, right? In this situation, it's instant. So the second it comes, I can now resell it. You know, that makes me feel a lot better. And then I don't get this nonsense of, we sent it, we promised we sent it before the cutoff, and you know, you're waiting, or you end up over the 4-day where everybody's like sweating. You know, to be able to be paid on a Saturday in Ramadan, you know, and to be able to be topped up because the MTO is killing it, you know, and every 6 hours doing more holiday business than they thought they would be doing, and they can top up during the day on a Saturday or Sunday, is amazing, you know? And I don't have to take counterparty risk in several different markets. And because I have customers that want hard currencies, I can just sell that immediately on these exchanges. So for me, it speeds up settlement so much. A couple of companies were really hesitant to do it. They thought I was a lunatic. Then they tried it. And now they're like, we're moving everything over. So I know that sounds crazy, but I really recommend you guys open an account. It's the same as opening up a new bank account, and you'd be really surprised how quickly it gets there. And like I said, you could start, and like the guy said, you could start with a dollar pegged one, you know, from one of the big guys, and you can keep your money in the account in dollar. So if you want to move it over, you move it over to dollar with a click, you pay me with another click, and then you're back to dollar. So who cares if it moves up and down? Your exposure is minutes, you know? So I'm sure everybody here trades currencies and they hold the exposure the whole day. I don't know how many times you reset your price for your customers during the day, but everybody here deals with currency volatility. With this, it's minutes, so it's not that big a deal. I think that part gets over talked about, and the speed of settlement is under discussed.
And it's real time. I mean, yeah, go ahead.
No, it's real time. It goes back to your earlier point where, you know, you've got the traditional cash collection and you've got that 2 or 3, 4, 5 day lag. That goes away.
Just on my salary, I get paid in the salary. If the currency's moving like this, I immediately cash out. If it's moving in my favor, I might hold it. But if I want to, it's a click. And it's on the same app. So I can move between the two. Very easy. Right. So, you know, yes, it moves, but you can click out of it.
And then,
I'm semi-convinced now. It's okay.
I'm going to add one note that there are some banks, because if you do need to go to cash settlement, there are some banks that have to rewire their internal U.S. banks that have, such as Sterling. And there are networks that settle 24 hours. So if you do hit big volumes, there are places that you can go to actually cash out the USDC on the weekend for real cash to your bank account.
I think we had a question over here. Yeah.
In the back as well. They have the microphone.
Oh, but yeah, I noticed. Where's the microphone?
Somebody in the back has it.
Oh, okay. You've already got it. But okay, we'll go to you after him.
So
okay.
go for it.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
This is a good microphone.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for that answer. Bearing that in mind, first of all, my name is John Samegbo. I'm the founder and CEO of PayAngel. We won the Social Impact Award yesterday, so we're excited to be here. Now, following up on your answer, this question goes to Richard Meredith, MoneyGram. I was quite excited by what you did with Ripple, with XRP for settlement and liquidity management, which is exactly what Elizabeth is talking about. Yeah. But with all the problems with the SEC, where does MoneyGram stand right now on that kind of arrangement?
Well, the XRP Ripple at the time, before that all started, was more treasury settlement in the background. And MoneyGram, we parted ways. Just when that started, and we've moved on, and I guess they're doing their thing. And right now, our focus is really on the Stellar partnership and growing our online asset, which has really, over the last couple of years, done huge amounts of growth. The pandemic helped that. If we just look in 2011, I think 2% of our volume was on digital. We're now sort of just over 40%, and that continues to grow and grow and grow. But as far as the Ripple thing, that is something that's moved away.
So I suppose my question is, are you still a believer in using blockchain and crypto for solving the liquidity and settlement problems?
Well, absolutely. I mean, that's what Stellar is now hopefully going to do for us. I mean, the whole Stellar is kind of the on and off ramp of fiat, right? And between that is the US dollar C, which we work with Circle on, and we use Texas International Bank for the settlement of the fiat. So absolutely, that's a huge focus, and we've seen a great start to that whole journey, and that's really the sort of entry into blockchain that MoneyGram's done over the last, I believe, since June when we launched it in 14 countries. Yeah.
And Stellar was created by the founder of Ripple.
Correct.
It's basically Ripple with different politicians at the top of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse my
So it's kind of like
explanation.
built on. No, well, yeah.
So same bone vertebrae of technology, but maybe a different governance model.
That's a great question. I mean, the blockchain for us, blockchain is really interesting, and it's definitely part of our DNA going forward. And as I said earlier, we're looking for more and better ways to exploit that. We've got some clever people, not me, but other clever people doing that.
Okay, just if you can come to the front, Tarif. Just one more question before we go online.
Cleverer people.
Exactly.
Hi, I'm from ETT Global. We do digital banking software, and we've over the past couple of years we've integrated with the Bitcoin and Ethereum blockchains. The problem we can see is that we've only got one client who's taken the blockchain module, and the others, they're so embedded with their banks, the big banks and everything, that they just can't take the risk of getting involved because they'll lose their banking. So I wonder if you have, the only place I've seen that works is Canada. I believe the banks would deal with you in Canada, but how do we get these people onto the blockchain?
Yeah, two things. There are a few banks, and there's not a lot. There are a few banks, I don't want to name them right now because everybody will call them after, in Europe, with European licenses, and in the UK, and in that do bank businesses that touch this. Now, you have to kind of be actively looking for that to find that. If you have an incumbent business without a disruptive model, without thinking they probably are not willing to change anything. It would be like trying to convince someone to change their CRM system, right, or the banking middleware, you know. But what we're excited about is the growing customer segment. Almost every new fintech that we take on, or every new bureau de change that we work with, is more open to it, because they're already fighting to get accounts. They don't have that incumbent arrangement, that incumbent infrastructure, and it's been closed off to them. So a lot of the customers that we work with that do want to use it are ones that are trying to, you know, hit up against the incumbents. And we find that if they have the tenacity to make it work, we do see them grow bigger. We had the top 2 remittance companies in the space, and right now a couple of incumbents are coming in and taking a huge chunk of their volume. You know, we've seen a company called Sendwave, I don't know if you guys know this company, you know, come in and rise to number 1 in some of our markets, and then get bought by WorldRemit, and now their second business, which is last mile settlement, is rising up. This company didn't exist a couple of years ago. And so I think I would look for the startups and the new challengers that are coming in, because they're more willing to work with new types of banks. But I agree, you know, convincing an older company who's been around a while, who has that relationship, to move over is hard. But we convinced Procter & Gamble. That was a 3-year convincing. And now they've been using it to settle for the last couple of years.
That was kind of the disruption I was talking about earlier, and you know, Walter had a good point, but think a little bit outside of traditional means and go in different directions to find what you need.
New client segment.
New clients, yeah.
Okay, thanks. Anything online?
So yeah, we do have a few questions, but I do feel there's a bit of overlap with many of the things that have been discussed so far. But we'll take a few and just see how it goes. So the first one, which is I think slightly linked to the question the gentleman just asked, is cryptocurrency a threat for money service business licenses or being licensed?
I'm not going to. One, it depends on what region and country they're doing and how they're doing it. I don't think it is a threat at all. It's actually it can be a rewarding, you know, venture for MSBs. It has that reputation, and I think you mentioned that in the planning. You know, crypto isn't some evil thing. It is. It's out there. It's been used quite a lot already in this market, and maybe we should be talking about those use cases more rather than, you know, talk about the mud. You know, one of the things I wanted to sort of highlight to the audience today, it is acceptable to have crypto, and I know there are question marks about getting accounts frozen and so on, but you know, you have to do a little bit of work, but it is acceptable, you know, by the regulators as well, largely speaking. It depends on what you're doing with it as well.
Yeah, I think licensed MSBs can use it, as we've discussed, and I think exchanges that are going to be using it for remittances will need to get MSB licenses, and that's already the case in the US.
Okay, let's take another one. What's your view on CBCDs? How far are we from witnessing CBCDs? Do you think they will eventually replace fiat currencies?
Talked about this. I mean, it goes with the market, bull and bear market. Christine Lagarde was very pro CBDC a couple of years ago, and now she says they're a threat to national monetary sovereignty. So it really depends on where these policymakers are in their career and the market cycle, I think.
I think that Barbados launched one, but it was purely retail wallets, and it was for distributing COVID money. It was, I think, the maximum $200 is the equivalent.
Exactly, yeah.
So they're using it more. I think it depends on the use case. So they didn't look at it as a replacement for money. This is an easy way to disperse money to everybody.
Like vouchers.
Like vouchers, basically, yeah.
So that I think is the only retail CF in the market, right? The retail.
Yeah.
Most of it has been on the wholesale side, right?
Yeah, I mean, except maybe El Salvador with their giving away of Bitcoin Lightning, Bitcoin airdrops. Yeah. That would be the other one.
Okay, maybe we'll take just one more. Okay, we'll go with this one maybe. What is the customer need to trade or remit via crypto?
Honestly, the KYC is very similar to a remittance transaction.
Yeah.
Very similar. So if the exchange is not asking you for a photo ID that you're taking with your face, and facial recognition is common in a lot of them, something's wrong.
In fact, just to add to that, about a year and a half ago, I created a Binance account, and it was before they were suspended here, right? About a month. And I noticed that I could do 50,000 without any proof of address.
Yeah, that's why they got banned.
And I went, there's a problem. I obviously didn't do anything. And I reported it back and said, we can't have this facility. It's just something's patently wrong. And then a month later, they were suspended or shut down, right?
Most of the exchanges now use facial recognition. You have to submit your license. And if you have any kind of mismatch or any hit on your identity, you'll have to wait 3 to 5 days like anywhere else to get a manual check. There's also limits on how much you can do as a qualified investor or as an individual before registering as a business. If you want to open a wholesale account or an OTC business account, because I have them personally, but also our company has them, it's a whole other set of documentation, which is very similar to a corporate bank account.
Yeah.
That's it, yeah? That's good. I'd just like to thank our panelists for this. It's a very interesting session. So I learned lots, definitely. I'm sure, I hope the audience have done so as well. So I'll hand over to